So good afternoon. I'm happy to see some committed people. It's the quality and not the quantity that counts. So our last session on what has been 9 very productive panels, and Professor Somesh Singh, who had hosted one of the panels yesterday, would also be taking us through this last panel, which is, like I said, everything is about the money, honey. It's on markets, livelihoods, and equitable value chains. I will not go through the introduction of Somesh again because we did that yesterday. So without, we have a hard close at 3 because at 4 o'clock we have the Quaid declaration, which will be at this location, followed by the arrival of the governor. And then, of course, he will be visiting Gardenia, and all of you are also welcome to do that. So let's, without further ado, as they say, I'm handing over to Somesh for him to take this forward.
Thank you, Sandeep. So, without losing time, I would like to invite all the panelists on the stage. So, I would like to invite Lafitaga, Rocio, Salma, and Yerik. So like yesterday, I'm not going to introduce any of them. I would like them to introduce themselves because it's always better, right? So one by one, we can start with Yerik in this manner. And yeah, a brief introduction of yours. My name is Yerik. Just take the mic.
My name is Yerik. I'm from Kazakhstan, and I work in the Almaty Tourism Department. So, that's all. You can.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Mr. Saad, for inviting us. And I'm here to represent Fomento Cultural Banamex, that it's a cultural institution that depends on a bank, on one of the biggest banks in Mexico, Banamex. And we have been working with this support to support folk art, Mexican folk art, with a very strong system that has been working through 28 years by now, with 3 very strong pillars that we will talk about it later. But thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Salma from Jordan. I work with Turquoise Mountain, an organization that aims to preserve and revitalize cultural heritage, especially with communities when cultural heritage is at risk. We work with artisan communities in Afghanistan, Myanmar, Jordan, Syria, Palestine, and Saudi Arabia. And our main goal is, to celebrate cultural heritage, connect artisans to new networks by providing them with jobs, commissions, work, and access to market, and also by training a new generation. And my work basically is in Jordan. I'm the country representative for the office there, and I work closely with artisans from the region, especially Jordan, Palestine, and Syria.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Whakalawhalai atu kia matolosi, malo ni, malo elelei, ta alofa ni sampula vinaka, noa ia e Māori, kam na pane ni Māori, halo le keta, malo le soifua, tēnā koutou katoa. Assalamu alaikum, and warm Pacific greetings to you all. Thank you, President Mr. Saad Al-Kadumi, the World Crafts Council, and the Kuwait National Council for organising and hosting the second World Crafts Forum. It's an honour to be a panellist alongside the distinguished panel members here to share Indigenous, community-centred market perspectives from a Pacific context in New Zealand. I just want to quickly take some time to give a bit of context. So the context from New Zealand in a Pacific context is that we first acknowledge our tangata whenua, Indigenous people, our Māori people of New Zealand, and we acknowledge the Treaty of Waitangi, New Zealand's founding agreement that established a partnership between our Indigenous Māori and the Crown. And today, the treaty remains the centralised and core document that is central to our national identity, the law and public policy. And it's really poignant this week in particular, because on the 6th of February, it marks the annual observation of the Treaty of Waitangi. I am Nafen Lafitaga Nafen Peters, Chief Advisor Partnerships at the Ministry for Pacific Peoples. Our ministry is the principal advisor to the government on policies and interventions aimed at improving outcomes for Pacific peoples in New Zealand. Pacific peoples in New Zealand are predominantly a young and fast-growing population with diverse communities across urban cities and regions. We make up approximately 9% of the total population, and we're the largest Pacific diasporic population in the world, where many of our people descend from the Pacific Islands, but are born and raised in New Zealand. So that adds a unique makeup to our multi-ethnic society in New Zealand. And some of these people, there are more of them living in New Zealand than in their homelands. The Pacific arts and crafts are a core part of New Zealand's cultural and creative landscape, alongside our Indigenous Māori arts and crafts. They shape how we express identity, heritage, and belonging in this country. Our creative practices span across visual arts, performance, and heritage crafts such as weaving, textiles, carving, and tattooing. And these practices are sustained through families and communities more than formal institutions. Pacific arts and crafts within New Zealand make up $17 billion to the economy, or contributes $17 billion to the economy, and supports more than 100,000 jobs. And while their value isn't always captured in formal economic measures, Pacific crafts play a vital role in community economies, festivals, tourism, and cultural exchange. Importantly, crafts in New Zealand help our Pacific people remain deeply connected to the wider Pacific homelands, strengthening their cultural continuity, livelihoods, and regional relationships. I look forward to our conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you. You've actually, without me speaking, you've already set the tone, So you talked about markets, you talked about livelihoods, and you talked about value chains. So interesting. Good. That is, so now I'm going to play a film. Only thing is that, your necks will just turn around. So maybe if you were able to take a seat there just for 5 minutes, play the film, and then we come back. Yes, in the front also.
Lotus silk is one of the rarest fabrics in the world. Produced only in small scale across Cambodia, Myanmar, and more recently Vietnam, this natural fiber is only extracted by a few skilled craftspeople across the world. But making this silk isn't easy. Extracting enough lotus silk for one scarf can take 2 months, and the final product can cost 10 times as much as regular silk. So just how is it made? And what makes it so expensive? Phan Thi Thuan's family have been making silk for generations, growing and harvesting the threads from silkworms themselves to create luxury garments. But making lotus silk is different. Silk usually comes from silkworms. They're kept on wide trays and need to be fed almost 24 hours a day with mulberry leaves. The caterpillars delicately spin threads to create their cocoons, and it can take hundreds of silkworms to make a kilo of silk. But while the insects require careful looking after, they do most of the hard work themselves. The key difference between the bright yellow silk and the paler lotus version is that every single strand of lotus silk must be extracted by hand.
Tơ sen thì nó khác với cái lụa tơ tằm. Là tơ sen thì mình phải rút sợi tơ nó là thân mộc. Mà sợi tơ tằm kia nó có cái phần cứng hơn cái sợi tơ sen là vì nó nhờ vào cái nực của con tằm, nó qua một cái tuyến keo của nó rút từ ruột nó ra, cái là nó có cái phần mềm mại mà có một chút co giãn. Còn tơ tằm thì nó bóng, sang trọng. Tơ sen là quý phái.
Each thread of lotus silk starts with the stem of the lotus flower. The lotus is Vietnam's national flower and a plant that's grown across the country. While this fabric has been made for years in Myanmar, Phan Thi Toan only started experimenting with this fiber in 2017.
Với chúng tôi thì tất cả đất nước Việt Nam, nhân dân Việt Nam là ai cũng rất là quý cái bông hoa sen. Tất cả nước chúng tôi là rất là nhiều người trồng sen. Nhưng mà bao giờ cũng chỉ có thu hoa sen, thu hạt sen thôi. Còn cuống sen là vứt ra nó rất là bẩn. Khi mà người ta gợi ý cho tôi làm tơ sen thì tôi thấy có lợi cho nhân dân, cho nông dân thì tôi nghĩ là tôi có khả năng làm được thì tôi sẽ quyết tâm tôi làm.
Once the stem is selected and picked by hand, the silk inside can be extracted. Each stem contains a minuscule amount of thin, sticky fibers, which must be rolled together and dried. The threads need to be processed within 24 hours while they're still wet, otherwise they'll break. And so harvesting has to be done each day. And the lotus plants are only available to harvest between April and October. Once you've gone through the hard work of extracting these fibers, they're incredibly delicate too.
Bước đầu là tôi chưa nghĩ đến làm tơ sen thì tôi cũng nghĩ là tơ sen thì nó mỏng manh mà làm thì nó rất nhiều công. Sợi tơ tằm thì nó dai hơn cho nên là có thể dệt được bằng máy, còn sợi tơ sen thì nó không có độ dai như sợi tơ tằm cho nên là phải dệt bằng tay. Cái thời gian của cái việc lấy sợi là lâu nhất. Còn khi mà đã lấy được sợi rồi, cho vào máy dệt rồi thì nó cũng nhanh hơn nhiều, bởi vì tất cả bao nhiêu công đoạn mới được lấy được sợi thì một người lao động làm một ngày được 200 đến 250 cuống sen. Còn cái khăn rộng 36 cm, dài 1m75 m thì hết 9.200 cuống sen. Thì một người phải làm một cái khăn đấy là phải mất 2 tháng mới được một cái khăn.
Once dried, these threads are carefully weighed down and delicately hand-spooled. Then they're put into the loom. These fibers are fragile, but once woven can be as durable as traditional silk. Phan has a team of 20 workers creating these fibers each day, allowing them to produce 10 to 20 scarves each month. But when a 25-centimeter scarf can sell for just over $200, the hard work is worth it. The final product is unlike any other fiber. It's soft like silk, breathable like linen, and slightly elastic. These luxurious traits have made it popular with tourists searching for rare souvenirs. It's also recently been picked up by international fashion brands searching for a new luxury fiber. But its scale has been limited, as there are still few trained in the making of these silk threads. But despite the work involved, Phan Thi Toan is hoping that this skill could one day grow to become a larger industry.
Tôi dạy rất là nhiều, nhưng mà dạy những người lớn tuổi cũng nhiều. Những người lớn tuổi họ sẽ không có cái sự sáng tạo, không có đam mê mà không có cái làm thì nhanh bằng những thế hệ trẻ. Cho nên là 2 năm 19, 20 này là tôi đã dùng các em học sinh trong những dịp nghỉ hè là tôi dạy các em ấy. Mỗi năm là dạy 100 em. Thì là nhìn thì cái thế hệ tương lai đấy nó mới phát triển được tơ sen của chúng tôi. Nhưng mà tôi chỉ mong là nhân dân Việt Nam và những thế hệ mai sau nó sẽ giỏi hơn chúng tôi, để nó sẽ có những cái cách làm khác đi thì nó sẽ làm được nhiều hơn, nhanh hơn.
Thank you for watching. This was an example of the nature, we have so much of things, abundance in nature. But with skill, knowledge, you can convert the free resources into so much of value, which is as valuable as $200 to $400. And why, this example? Because when we went to Srinagar with Mr. Saad, to Srinagar in 24, there is a lake, which is Dal Lake. And it has so much of lotus all around. And they were cleaning the lake with a machine, huge machine, they were cleaning. And it was creating so much of carbon footprint. And then we were thinking that, look, a loss of skill has resulted in so much of carbon footprint being generated. And they're just cleaning the lake, throwing the lotus out, and then trying to dispose it off. Whereas things like this could create so much of value and create, so much of employment. What we are talking about, market livelihoods, and value. So how do we build value, from something which is non-valuable to build so much of value, through skill and traditional knowledge. So this was a good, start point. I thought let our panelists see the film, and then, we start talking about this. So I would like to again invite them on the dais so that we can start a discussion. Thank you for coming back. And the first discussion, which we want to have a quick, round of information from all of you, is why craft matters. Do you really think that it makes a difference or it doesn't make a difference? I mean, many, if you look at the youngsters, they feel that it doesn't really make a difference. Whereas people, if you look at craft sector, 70 to 80% of the craftsmen are above the age of 60 years, which makes it one of the most, alarming sectors in terms of age. So let us hear you out. Yeah, we start with Lafitaga. Do you think that craft matters?
Thank you. I think absolutely craft matters, and from all of the sharing that we've heard throughout the forum, everybody has contributed, the thoughts around how important it is on so many levels, not only in terms of cultural, our heritage, but also that economic opportunity for those who hold the knowledge of our crafts, but also the language that is able to be sustained.
Thank you. So I believe craft is not important, it's crucial. It's part of our identities, it's part of who we are, and it shaped everything that we've been using and seeing nowadays. So it formed us, and it was always, crafts have always been a form of documentation, a form of responding to client needs, and this is how it should always be and continue to be. Because if we want room to crafts today, we should always think of how it originated and the importance the important role that it played back in the days. And I would say the most important note here is not to label it under a certain umbrella. So we always say traditional crafts, what we should be saying is concurrent crafts, because crafts have evolved over time and they shouldn't freeze in time for any reason. So I think this is a note that we should always remember, and to remind ourselves that they're part of our today, our tomorrow, and our future. Thank you.
Interesting, so sharing, so there were two people, they had 1 rupee each. And they said, let's share it. So the other person gave 1 rupee to other, the other gave 1 rupee to one. Still they have 1 rupee, right? But the moment each of them share ideas, each of them will have 2 ideas. So that's the difference between, what the concept of economy in terms of currency versus the creative currency, which we have for a long time. Yes, Roshio.
Yes, hello, thank you. Well, yes, folk art. For us, folk art is very important. In Mexico, we have more than 12 million artisans. So folk art is part of the life of Mexico and the identity of Mexico. And yes, we have to consider part of it, of the economy. And here we have an example of what folk art can make. Remigio Mestas, he's one of the artisans of Oaxaca, and he was invited here to Kuwait. And he makes a difference in a whole state. He works with more than 200 artisans, weavers and embroiderers, working with materials of all around the world. He brings silk from Asia, from cotton from Egypt, and then he makes beautiful pieces with the hands of the artisans of Mexico, making a chain of commerce and economy all around Mexico. He has now 4 stores, so he's a story of success in Mexico. And here you can see how important it is to the folk art and craft in Mexico and to the world also.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the discussion. And I would like to share Kazakhstan experience using Almaty as an example. For a long time, crafts in Kazakhstan were viewed mainly as a cultural heritage. Today, the key shift has been integrating artisans into full value chains. In Almaty, craftspeople are no longer limited to production alone. They are increasingly connected to design, branding, urban markets, and tourism and export. This ecosystem approach helps address the core question, how value is created and more fairly distributed. Platforms, well, what about our platforms? Platforms such as the Kazakh Corner Craft Center, the Almaty Chamber of Crafts, and specialized studios provide training, professional support, and access to creative communities. And this enables artisans to grow as entrepreneurs, not only as producers. And we have also learned that sustainable livelihoods require permanent market environments, not only occasional festivals. In Almaty, regular craft fairs, pop-up stores, and international events such as the LA Craft Festival create stable demand and support fair pricing. Another priority is dignity through authorship and skill development. For example, in 2024, UNESCO conducted an design training in Almaty focused on branding, marketing, and digital tools. Almaty is increasingly connected to international markets through initiatives with the British Council, the Smithsonian, and UNDP. In 2025, the city was recognized as a World Craft City, reinforcing its role in global cultural diplomacy. And Kazakhstan experience shows that when policy, institutional markets are aligned, craftsmanship becomes a driver of creative entrepreneurship. Thank you so much.
Interesting. So Kyrgyzstan experience, right? Kazakhstan experience you've shared. Now the real challenge here is, I would like to throw another question at all the panelists. Is a typical supply chain, right? Supply chain is where you build supply, right? It's like a purely logistic system that works. The second is value chain. Now value chain, there are two specific aspects to it, if you look at. One is the current value chain, right? It's not a value chain. I will not call it a value chain. I'll call it a supply chain, because typically what happens is, if a designer product is being made, you look at the total value commanded by the brand or retailers, only 10%, 5% goes to the artisan, right? That is model one. Model two is, you look at, and examples like, for example, co-creation. It's an interesting term, which is there. Now, what does this basically mean? Co-creation means that you create together and you share together and you earn together, right? Now, these three critical points. So work together, create together means, a designer goes to an artisan and says, oh, I want to make a nice jacket, make a textile for me. When the artisan starts making textile, he comes with a design and said, no, not your design, this design. The point is, it is purely labor work. There's no art into it, We call artisan. Artisan means art. There is a prefix of art into artisan, which means they have to apply some kind of art into it. It's not happening there because there's no value he is adding. So as a result, what happens is, they become, instead of craftsmen, they become craft laborers. Now that's not a good idea, because then you are actually, devaluing their skills and everything. So from that shift, when, it talks about equitable value chain. What does that mean? That do they share equal? I mean, for example, we had Mr. Marcus, I don't know whether he's here or not, from WIPO. Now, another critical concern is that on any product that is being sold by brands, do they share IP? Designers never give IP. They say, oh, this is my product. I'm selling it in my name. Who are you? We have just given you a price. You're not sharing any IP. There is nothing. And at the end, which is worst even, is that suppose a textile has been bought for $2 and you sold for $200. You commanded $198, right? But are you giving 50% of that income back to the artisan's family? You're not. So the point is there's no equitability in terms of value chain, right? This is the current scenario. So my point is, in given such situation, what are the kind of models each of you envision which will create the equitable value chain or equitable value per se for these artisans? And why I'm saying this, because this is a big problem. We say artisans' income needs to be 2x, 3x, 4x, because inflation is there, their family also needs to grow. That's why most of the artisans are leaving craft. That's the reality world over. Now, point is, with this particular change, a little bit of change, they will command, at least 5x income immediately, without doing anything. So, we want to know from each of you that how do you think that, what are the kind of new value chain or new value systems or new value equity systems we can invent in terms of product, process or whatever, which can really generate a large income to these people who are already into the game, right? So I will begin again with Lafitaga and then, so right to left.
Okay, thanks. Next time we'll be the other way around, but yeah. So I think just to go back to and to reiterate what you were saying in terms of value, and from a Pacific perspective, although we may share the same ocean and values and culture are similar, there is, the definition of value is slightly different. And so, but one thing that we I guess, may all agree on in terms of that perspective is that the value is the cultural, ancestral, and relational meaning that's embedded in the craft, not just the sale price. And I know that this has been already mentioned by other panel members, but just to go back to our context in terms of Pacific and Indigenous Māori, we've defined our crafts as our treasures. They are created and were always created, as was mentioned earlier, for ceremony, for cultural practice, but also for the resources, for daily lives, for our communities, not for purchase or commercial profit. So it is the shift that we need to make in terms of where we're able to develop that initial idea of our definition and value of crafts. The intergenerational knowledge and the cultural responsibility that comes with the craft. Also, when we look at specific crafts in Māori culture, we have the carvings, like many other cultures, carvings and wooden panels that tell genealogy and stories and identity. We also have, in the Samoan context, traditional tattooing, which is a rite of passage in terms of the demarcation of roles and responsibilities. And so also to touch on the point that was made by the UNESCO representative yesterday, to add another aspect of the value, specifically for Pacific, is we are faced and impacted quite significantly by climate change. And so islands like Tuvalu, which will soon be underwater, they will be hugely affected in terms of their crafts, their culture, their language, because they will be displaced. Many of them have migrated to New Zealand. And so because of all these factors, our Pacific people in New Zealand are looking at ways in terms of how do we measure this in terms of how we price in order to acknowledge all these different aspects of value. We don't have the answer right now, but we are working towards models that reflect our Pacific values. And so these models are also, in terms of our commissioning, as an agency where we commission support for communities and craftspeople, our models and frameworks that we use are reflective of some of our crafts. We have frameworks that are based on the embroidery process of Te Vaivai for the Cook Islands people. We have the Tongan practice of flower garland making, which we call the kakala framework. And so these are embedded to not only help shift the way in which the value chain or the process is applied, but also reflects our own specific context.
Interesting. So she's more talked about the value system. But I must tell you from experience, ethics does not sustain if there is no commerce. At some point of time, you'll bend down to commerce. You'll say, oh, just hell with it. I'm not bothered because I'm not getting any money. My family is not surviving. So what morality I'm going to pass on to next generation? So it's important that when we talk about the value system, which Lafitaga has said, it's very important. But how do you then balance that with the commerce is the critical question. Yeah.
Okay, so in order to answer your question and reflect on what you have said, I would like to zoom out a little bit and start from the beginning. So usually we are now saying that crafts are endangered, and that's pretty much true. And we ask ourselves, or we mention that crafts are endangered due to displacement, wars, conflict, climate change, but also from my practice, I'm working closely with artisans. I've identified another gap. So all of these are valid, of course, but there's also one that we forget to mention, which is the gap between the artisan and the market, which is pretty much true. So also to I would say, help you envision what the gap looks like nowadays, I would like to walk you through history. So back in the days, the artisan was not only a maker, he was also the designer of his own work. The way he'd function is basically, he'd get a brief from a client, aka the market, wanting a certain piece with a certain form, function, drawing on from existing patterns and materials that he used, and then accordingly, the client makes the piece. Adding on that also, the artisan was always, artisans all over the world, when you look at motifs and patterns, they were somehow documenting their surroundings or using the available materials. And that whole ecosystem somehow made the craft at some point, the main major source of income for communities, for countries, and so on. Moving forward with industrialization, with us as designers coming to the world, with all of that ego and wanting to change things, the whole dynamic changed. And I'm a designer myself, and I remind myself of this most of the time. Designers who work closely with artisans should know that they're not authors, they're translators. The author here is the artisan. We need to highlight how important his work is and the skill that he's carrying. And we won't be able to make a piece that speaks volumes, that speaks culture, that speaks identity without having the artisan involved in the design process. And you mentioned co-creation, but it has a certain format, I'd say. So co-creation is a tool. It is important. It's a way of, bridging that gap that we're talking about. Yes, the gap is there, not because the artisan is not skilled enough, not because he doesn't have, the eye or the taste. It's because there is misalignment between the market needs and the artisan. And I mean, maybe the designer role in this case is bridging that gap through maybe coming ourselves, maybe with our background in research and a bit of, innovation, coming with ideas that would complement what the artisan is doing. But again, we're translators, we're not authors. So there is a whole process. So for me and the team, the way we do it is, whenever we want to design, let's say, a specific piece for a specific client or a market or a retailer, make sure we understand the craft. We spend a lot of time with the artisans at the workshop. I mean, many pieces that we've made were born out of a cup of tea at the workshop. You get inspired from their stories, and that's also another thing we highlighted, which is storytelling and branding. So when all what we're doing is all about the artisan and the craft and having full understanding of the craft techniques, its history, what does this mean, how can we push the boundaries of the craft. And you won't get that if you're coming with that ego. You won't get that if you don't put yourself in the shoe of the artisan and design things together. And the other way around, to be present during the production process. And this is also another role that you can add on the equation, which is, maybe a certain artisan is used to do things in a certain way, but things change. So how can you push without losing a lot of the craft value? And putting between brackets also a topic that we've touched on yesterday, which is the authenticity of the craft. So authenticity somehow freezes a little bit what we can do with craft, because the word authenticity itself, I asked myself multiple times, what is authentic about the craft? Is it the technique? Is it the pattern? Is it the motif? Is it the piece itself that have been made? What is authentic about it? And I think none of us will find the right answer for this question. But for me, it's how can we ensure that authenticity keeps on evolving and moving from, bridging these gaps, understanding what the market needs, and again, creating this kind of alignment. And it doesn't only come also from the designer role, because also it's very important to highlight there are other challenges and things that are mitigating us from achieving more for the artisans. And maybe we can discuss that as we move forward with the discussion. Thank you.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So what happens is you said, co-creation is challenging. I do agree. But there is also another method, to the whole thing, which we always give examples. We have plenty of examples, but not going to discuss that today. We say that where artisan ends, designer should begin, right? That's another approach. So what happens is you are neither intruding into their lives, not let them interfere in your affairs, right? So it's basically there you add value, and then that value finally translates to or goes to a customer. Second very interesting point, because I'm coming to Roshio, she's talking about folk art. I asked an artisan, I said, your paintings, you make paintings, narrative art, but you only sell most of them for $2,000. I've never seen you commanding much higher price. Whereas in an auction in a gallery in New Delhi has seen the prices like $100,000 for single artwork. What's the difference? Why can't you command the price of $100,000? And the perspective this guy gave was incredible. He said, we will never be able to get that kind of money. I said, oh, that's interesting. There's so much of clarity. And why so? They said, because, we make this narrative art same all the time. Whereas if you look at modern artists, they make only one piece and they will never repeat that. So it was interesting to see that how community keeps on manufacturing, the point which you said, that keeps on manufacturing those things again and again. What you said, let's go back. They were manufacturers. They were community manufacturers. And then they were consumers, through Mela Haat Bazaars, which were the traditional formats of selling. So from that shift to this shift, it is interesting. So Roshio, what do you think, how these folk artists, and I'm surprised to see the numbers, 12 million you said, right, Mexico?
Yeah, more than.
This is more than our official figure, Dr. Koshi. We claim 7 million in artisans in total in India.
Well, the 12 millions also include people who make candies, for example, and this type of food, like artisanal food. But we have like millions of artisans that make clay, textiles. That's the number that we have to be really to be more realistic on which is making clay and which is making candy. But it's millions of artisans.
Interesting. So, in your experience, right, coming from this sector, how do you think that these folk artists really can command better value? Because it's a huge challenge. As she was talking about storytelling, Lafitaga was talking about value system. All this is also very important. But at the same time, how do you really command, better prices? Do you have examples?
Yes, we have examples. And we as an institution, we are like the mediators to do this. Because we are not the designer, we are not the artisan, we are like a mediator. So we have a lot of examples. Many brands come to us and tell us, what can I do for the artisans? For example, last year we worked with Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren came to Mexico, take a design of a zarape de saltillo and put it on a jacket. So Mexican government saw that and he punished Ralph Lauren for that. So Ralph Lauren came again to Mexico and say, what can I do to amend my mistake? Because it was a mistake. It is not my design. It was an inspiration. That's why all the designers said that it's an inspiration, but I do it wrong. So Mexican government say, okay, let's amend this mistake with Fomento Cultural Banamex. So they came to us and say what we can do for the communities. There are two different communities in Mexico that work with the zarape de saltillo, that it's a pedal loom weaving with wool and natural dyes. So we have two communities. So Ralph Lauren started working with the communities. They first make an association because we have to know that the designs are not one person. This is a community design. So it's an ancestral design. So who is the owner of the design? You cannot pay one person for the design. It's the whole community. So they make associations in both communities so that the association can have all the profits of the sales and then share it all along the different artisans of the communities. But they have been working with the communities, we have been working with the communities more than 2 years, making workshops, making better natural dyes for them, bringing wool from Italy or from other parts of the world so that they can have more quality, their pieces. And we have been working 2 years. We made a contest, and Ralph Lauren bought the designs. And the final purpose is that Ralph Lauren will have the designs, and they will work along with the artisans, giving the names and the profits, same names and profits, same as Ralph Lauren.
Very nice.
But yes, with that example, we have a lot because many designers, more clothes, work with artisans now. But nowadays, I think in Mexico we have been successful with that. I think it's a good example that you can do it right. You can work with the artisan and give the same treatment, artisan, designer, or maybe artisan luxury label, and they have the same profit. But it has been like 30 years of work of institutions like Fomento Cultural Banamex, and nowadays, like 12 years ago, with the government of Mexico, because they're like having a lot of programs. We make a really nice market now. Like we have like the 5th edition last year, when the name is Original. It's a very, very big market in Mexico where you can find all the artisans of all the Mexican Republic, that it's very big, and it's difficult to go to every part of Mexico and buy things. So you can have it in Mexico City and in other parts, this market, where you can find all textiles and original textiles, no? And we have a runway, a very, very nice runway. And they are very strong now. So I think in Mexico we're very successful of giving the value to the artisans, and they can have the same profit to artisan designers, artisan labels, but it has been a work of more than 30 years, I think.
Wonderful. That's an interesting point.
Just to reconfirm that.
Sure, please.
Mr. Marcus from WIPO mentioned exactly what, on the same lines, to create in order to protect the international, the intellectual property, is to create, because it's a community, it's not one artisan.
Absolutely.
And exactly the model you have spoken about, WIPO was. He gave the example. So that's something very interesting, to repeat this example or to promote this experience, successful experience, as all over the world.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to reconfirm.
Absolutely, yes. This is very, very interesting examples. And then now coming to you, tourism. Now tourism is, for you, yes. For tourism, value chain, building value through tourism. You are part of tourism, ministry. So how do you see that, how do we build value through tourism? You have a great experience in that. Can you share that?
As I said earlier, Almaty is increasingly connected in international markets through initiatives with the British Council, the Smithsonian and UNDP, and in 2025, the city was recognized as a World Craft City, reinforcing its role in global cultural diplomacy. In Kazakhstan, experience showed that when policy institution and market are aligned, craftsmanship becomes a driver to creative entrepreneurship and long-time urban resilience.
Thank you. So, yeah, we will now take the last point, which is, the crux of the matter. Crux of the matter basically means what is it which we should do in order to build value system or value processes or value in products, whatever, we say. How do we build value, commercial value, ethical value, institutional value? How do we build those? So if we can take, few takeaways from each of you, which helps in, being part of the policy document, so that, we are able to say, okay, this is the takeaway finally, after all the experience and discussions, this is what will come up. So I will ask Lafitaga to share her takeaways, and then we'll move on to others.
From the Pacific context, and just bringing it back to Pacific, because everybody has a different experience, and it's great to hear how things have developed. And just to remind, as a reminder, that in the context of Pacific artisans and Pacific culture, where collectivism is a value and reciprocity is embedded in our culture, that is what guides a lot of the decision making, and also guides the way in which the communities respond. And just touching on I just wanted to touch on the point around the intellectual property, because there are some examples that affected our people in terms of a global company brand of sportswear created a line where they used Samoan sacred tradition tattooing patterns of males, and they had those on their sportswear for women, which was culturally inappropriate. And so the collective responded, not only in terms of the artisans, the communities, but also the cultural knowledge holders, as well as leaders, both in the community and in government, in order to, as we heard mentioned by the UNESCO representative earlier today, in order to respond and to hold these companies, these global companies, accountable, of which they apologized and then removed that sportswear line from, or removed that from their line. And so I want to just come back to what that means for us in terms of value chain. Because, as was mentioned before, the artisans are not just artisans, they are knowledge holders. They are more than just, for us as Pacific to make profit. Profit is, of course, the ideal. But for us, in terms of the sustainability of the craft, of the knowledge that sits with the craft, and also having a very young population and engaging our young people who should then be able to continue these crafts and this cultural heritage. That is the value that we see will bring the profit. And at this stage, it is not necessarily, I know that individual artisans may, of course, want that profit, but as a collective, those values are what drives us, especially in the diaspora, where the majority of our Pacific people in New Zealand, language revitalization and maintenance is a huge issue for our young people. And so through our strategies, policies of the government in New Zealand and our ministry, we are trying to, what we see as profit and value is what will help sustain that for our younger generation, for them to then also learn crafts through language revitalization. And I know it's not quite at that economic level that you touch on, but I really want to stress that because that is what is a driver for our Pacific peoples.
So what she's saying is two key takeaways, which comes out of it. First is value framework as a part of policy, which means, that do's and don'ts. So that at least, there is a certain framework, right? And the second is value system or value transfer, from older generation to the younger generation. because that is also critical, because what value are they perceiving and building? I mean, you have always taught children, that, okay, save money, invest money, they know the value of money. But is that the way they understand the value of culture, heritage, craft, and things like that? They don't, because we have never, built that as a part of our own, grooming. So these are two key takeaways. Yes, we move to you.
Yeah, actually that's very important, because now we hear people saying craft is expensive, right? But the problem is not with the craft. It's, again, the misalignment between the market and the artisan and the value that is perceived. So I think what we should actually count for is, the value that the piece makes, the time it took for the artisan to make it, and look into the full breakdown of what contributed in the cost of the piece. I mean, nowadays we're looking at artisans that are competing against, cheap imported goods, high material cost, unpredictable tourism cycles, and little policy frameworks, often in a lot of areas. So I think if we want to answer and find the solution, it's all about addressing all of these issues. For example, let's say in a country where, I'll talk about Jordan. So yes, we have a couple of, raw materials, but most of our raw materials that the artisan use, like wood and stuff, are imported. And thus we have, a lot of taxes on materials and so on. So already the artisan starts with a piece that's already expensive from all the associated costs from it. So one of the things that we've been talking and discussing in terms of policies, how about we add some sort of a policy that says, yes, artisans who have workshops, who are practicing, who are contributing in their own way to the economy, can get tax exemption. Another example, speaking of, tourism. We have beautiful historical sites surrounded by a lot of tourism and touristic souvenir shops. There should be, maybe there is, but it's not applied, some laws that could say, all products that are sold in souvenir shops around the historical sites should be locally made in the country. Because, for example, again, when we're talking about competition, if we want to compare an imported souvenir to an artisan who's making the piece in the same country, it won't be able to compete price-wise, quality-wise, and the list goes on. So such policies are very important to highlight the importance of these. And also, on another hand, on another world, we shouldn't also, again, frame, if a certain craft doesn't work under, a touristy souvenir piece, it would be maybe considered for a tourist or large scale, then there is another model where we need to apply, which is collaborating beyond what can be done and pushing the boundaries of the marketplace of the craft through collaborating with brands, working on large commissions. We've done, for example, work for hotels, and, the work would be done locally in the country and then shipped. But there's a whole process and learning process that we get to learn along the way as well. So I think taking and looking at all of these things will help somehow, adding some value and shifting the perspective and the perception of what is, a handmade product. So it's, yes, one of them is beyond what we've discussed as redefining the relationship or the designer and maker relationship, and making it more of, an approach where the artisan's voice is there and making the artisan as the author. But also there are a lot of things that we need to tackle and work on, and generally, and from many.
Yeah, so interesting three words, that comes from what she says. Value perception, proposition, and integration. So that is very important, because, if it is not perceived as a valuable thing, and it is also not integrated into a social system or the, structural system, it will never build a value. So last point we'll take from you, Rocio, and we'll end this.
Yes, thank you. Again, we as an institution, we're in a different position, but to give value to folk art in Mexico, for us, is one of the main points, the promotion. We promote Mexican folk artisans all around the world. We have a very big collection that has been traveling to many countries, and we have been presenting more than 150 exhibitions all around the world with more than 20 million visitors. So that makes strong the folk art in Mexico, and it's a lot of promotion to the artisans, that their pieces have been in beautiful museums in Los Angeles, in New York. And that promotion, it's very important. Also, we have 11 publications of folk art. 2 of them are really sold out. So we make thousands of publications of that, and they are sold out. So promotion, for me, it's one of the most important pillars, like to give value to this folk, Mexican and Latin America, because we have the 2 collections in the world. And another thing is in which we help also is in the commercialization. And we make fair trade and direct sales. We avoid the intermediaries. We don't add prices. We don't add price to the price anything. So we make a direct sale, no? And that's important for us. We also put pieces into auctions, into Sotheby's, New York, in New York, and Sotheby's, Phillips, and the other auction house, I'm not remembering, Christie's. So those kinds of things increase the value of the pieces of the artisans, and they know, like, internationally, they are like in the same place as Latin American painters, for example, in Christie's or Sotheby's. So that increased values to the pieces of folk art. And well, I think another thing is we provide a lot of training to the artisans. We gave them like online courses about fiscal things, taxes. In Mexico now we have a model of tax because artisans are like small entrepreneurs, so they have like special treatment. They pay only 1.2% of taxes, for example, and that's very good for them. So, but they don't know them. They don't know that. So we are like trying to give all the communication we can with all the things we can, online courses or direct courses to them, so they can know all about this. And we're making so many things to give value to the artist.
Very, very nice. So last point which comes up is building value through commercialization, promotion, and education. And I think with this, we end this entire discussion. I'm sorry, we are running sort of time, so we have to conclude. Thank you very much.